This was Dungeons & Dragons 2nd Edition, played at a local comic book store, not long before 3rd Edition came out. The DM was prepping an encounter for that night, and for some reason he needed 200 orcs, and he spent like an hour rolling hit points for each orc, individually, all 200 of them. To this day, I cannot imagine what was going through his head. This same DM came up with a homebrew rule for saving throws where you had to roll over your stat to save. This led to a ridiculous incident where a character had to make a con saving throw to wake up from, normal sleep, and he couldn't because his character had a con of 18. What even happens in that scenario? Like, does the character just fall asleep and never wake up for all of eternity? Like Sleeping Beauty? Did he just go into a glass coffin and await true love's kiss, and there's a whole campaign about trying to wake him up from this impossible con save? I suppose we'll never know. So I joined a D&D group right before quarantine started. I've never played Dungeons & Dragons before this point, so to let myself learn at my own pace, I chose a human bard, since to me it seemed the simplest. The recent lockdown around March had ended our in-person campaign, which I considered my practice run anyway, and we start plans to make a new game and a new set of characters. I told the DM that I was going to be playing a female bard named Tonda, and he didn't like that. He started beating around the bush, trying to convince me not to play a girl, since he, understandably, didn't want a typical thirsty bard girl played by a teenage boy. Look, I don't play like that. Tonda was just a lovable idiot, and a lot of her personality was self-inserted. Fast forward to a little while later into the campaign, and I will never forget this conversation. He asked me, mid-dexterity check on a Discord voice call with the rest of the party listening, if Tonda had a dick, and how long it was? His excuse was lore reasons, and he thought that I should have thought of this important fact. We were in the middle of going from one rooftop to the other by climbing across a rope someone would hold onto. The reason he asked was so he could know if Tonda was going to tie her end of the rope to her dick so she could support the weight of the entire party. TLDR, DM was hornier than the bard, and wanted to know dick strength for some reason. To distract ourselves from my inevitable descent into madness, let's talk about characters of the opposite gender. I think it is totally okay to play characters that are a different gender than you, especially since as a DM, you're definitely going to do it, and as a player, I think it's perfectly acceptable as long as you're not weird about it. Now, of course, that advice applies to reasonable people. That is not what this DM is. Clearly, I have no idea what they were thinking, and the more I think about it, I think I'm going to go insane myself, so let's just move on. So I figured I'd do another one of these as I got heaps, and it's kind of an Am I the Asshole post. Characters aren't really important, so we'll just use classes and refer to them if I need to. Oh no, but how am I going to tell who everyone is without confusing acronyms and overly complex naming conventions? Oh, what will I do? So, the campaign is going. I've joined halfway through at level 7. First thing to note is that there is heaps of homebrew, and less of the cool homebrew and more of the because I said so homebrew. Anyways, I play for a bit. I lose my first character, it was totally my fault, and I turn down being revived by death, as this happens so often as a plot point in these campaigns. I now turn down any revives except from actual players. So, what I learned with my first character is don't try to contribute to the plot. The DM has chosen the player character who is the main character, and deviation from that player storyline is basically impossible, or will just lead back to it anyway. Knowing this, I bring in my Dwarven Cleric, class in Dwarven Warrior character and generic backstory involving a dungeon, and I'm good to go. Honestly, not to get fussed about playing, but more interested in hanging out with friends, so I just buff it. Some sessions go by, and we have a huge session. Funeral and a boss battle with BBEG that the party's been chasing for some time. Next session, we all just want to rest and regroup. We arrive at a tavern and start chatting/planning. I go to bring up a bit of a secret topic, so I decide to check for eavesdroppers, and sure enough, we have an eavesdropper listening in from another table. Possessing no tact, I ask him loudly if he wouldn't mind minding his own business, to which I hear a voice in my head the DM tells me I recognize as having mildly influenced my thoughts before. I am not pleased, so I animate his chair to walk him over to our table and ask him about his deal. You see supernatural shadows under his hood, making his features foggy. Okay, so I cast Dispel Magic on that illusion. Remember this Dispel as it is going to be relevant. So now we have an elf with scars in front of us. I cast Detect Magic to make sure nothing else is going on. Get told he is teeming with necromancy and has a powerful enchantment on his weapon. I ask what the weapon is and get told I can't see a weapon on him. I point out that he just said I can see a weapon, and this goes back and forth until I just give up and we move on. Remember, this Detect Magic is running the whole time, so we start questioning him and learn a few things through some self-important dialogue. His name is White Death. Not his title, his name. He has lived 15,000 years. He is the world's greatest bounty hunter and shows us a list of bounties to just prove it. He knows the entire party by name and can speak every language. I'm actually not sure there was anything he didn't know. So we ask him what he wants, and he tells us that he knows we are going after a bounty. I picked up this bounty like 3 sessions ago and talked about it once, but we weren't strong enough. So he proposes we play bait, and he kills the target for equal share. It is at this point I recognize some similarities between the White Death and a player character the DM plays in another campaign called Winter. So I start to poke a little fun. I begin by asking how we know he is who he says he is. As far as we know, he's just shit at eavesdropping. So he throws me his business card, and I write my name on a napkin and throw it back at him saying what that proves. This goes on for a bit with some of the other party members joining in, except the ranger, who actually kind of liked the guy. The White Death brags that he never misses, and we ask if that's because he doesn't claim what he's aiming at until after he takes the shot. At this point, I realize that my character wouldn't be this harsh, so I tell the White Death that I'm sorry. He pissed me off by eavesdropping, so if he apologizes for that, we can start fresh, to which he responds, never. The ranger eventually breaks through the restarted mocking to convince us to think it over during the night. The White Death agrees and leaves. I say, hell no, we got more questions, and try to place him gently back in his seat, to which I'm told my hand goes through him? He was an illusion the whole time? Remember the Dispel Magic? When I question this, the DM just smiles and says it appears to have no effect. We all go to bed except the ranger, who decided to do some last-second potion shopping while out and about, and the DM asks if some ridiculous number like 32 hits, and the ranger's like, yeah, duh. 72 points of damage. And because of a feature, the ranger is down because it did over 50% HP in damage, at which point all I hear is, I never miss, in our heads, and we are awoken. The session ends there, and no one is happy. We just kind of leave, and the game goes on hiatus for 4 weeks, because the DM knows they threw a temper tantrum, and is trying to find a way to fix it without admitting he threw a temper tantrum, because we made fun of his OC character. We did get back into it, and the session to fix it made no one happy again, and there was really no way to do so. Sorry about the formatting, typed this out on my phone. I can do another one for the session after this one, as it was a bit of a joke as well. TLDR, we made fun of a DM self-insert, and he throws a tantrum and kills a player character. We have seen many DM NPCs come and go, but they usually have better names than literally White Death. I can't imagine someone going to a character sheet and then writing down White Death and thinking, yes, this is a name people are going to take seriously. I honestly would have thought that this was some kind of satire, and the DM was going to put this character in and have him actually be totally, utterly useless, like a Gaston type. That would have been incredible. That would have been hilarious. But no, that's not what they did. Instead, they made a legit character named White Death and completely ruined the campaign. Look, don't get mad and kill player characters. Don't do that. It is not a mature thing to do. If you're upset about something, handle it outside the game. Handling it inside the game will just make people more annoyed and upset. Don't do that. It just spreads the toxicity around. If you have an issue, take it outside the game. Now, of course, the DM's issue is a really stupid one. If you're going to make an NPC like that, you should be aware that stuff happens. And I understand that there are times where players will make fun of things that are supposed to be serious, and yeah, that sucks. But you also need to understand that not everything you write is going to be very good. Some of it is going to be sometimes comedic. I've done that. Sometimes there were scenes I intended to be serious and they ended up being funny. I just rolled with it instead of feeling insulted. Unless the scene is something that is incredibly, incredibly serious and my party are being jerks about something, which has never happened to me, I'll just talk to the player characters about it and we'll work out what's going on. Of course, like I said, never happened, and I doubt it's going to happen to many people because most player characters can understand and read the room. But this is just comedic, and you can't blame the players for laughing at your unintentional joke. This happened a couple weeks ago. With several hobby stores reopening for smaller tournaments, I found a game which my friend Sam admitted would last several sessions as a new book, Wild Beyond the Witchlight, was coming out and he wanted to run something that was considered filler. I played a kobold character that I was really attached to. I really liked this character and found him to be enjoyable. This is because I developed a full backstory on him that I spent a while on. This was looking to be a fun time, and for the first few sessions I played, nothing went wrong. That was until Sam informs me that next week he was moving the game to his house, and that another player would be joining since the location was an hour more away. The hobby store itself was an hour to get to, so I didn't feel like driving the extra hour to play the game. This happens. Sometimes things can change and complicate things. However, Sam wants my character sheet, the kobold, so that he can give it to another player. First off, I spent time developing this character, so I tell Sam that I wasn't really just gonna give them up. He gets annoyed and also aggressive because of this, and it sparks a brief argument about how I was going to delay things for the newcomer. I'm thankful for the store employee who sticks up for me and tells him that he wasn't entitled to give away my character. Sam gives me a look like I was in the wrong and walks out the store calmly. I don't think Sam realizes how people can be attached to characters they made, and that giving them up would mean passing the rights of their creation to just some guy. The next week comes by, and one of Sam's players that I played with proceeds to tell me that I dodged a bullet. I need to be honest, this guy seemed pretty over the top over something that happened with him and Sam, so I don't fully believe what he told me. This is another thing, take things if they seem off with a grain of salt. He told me that Sam was arguing with other people over a rules dispute, which ended in Sam having a meltdown. People started walking out, but Sam tried to prevent this by standing in front of the driveway so no one could drive off. They were being held there for a few hours until they were able to convince Sam that they were going to call the authorities. From what I heard, the guy who told me the story had a record for being a problem as well. Have to agree with OP here, that final story sounds a tad bit over-exaggerated. I've heard of RPG freakouts, but I need to respect a guy for his dedication to stand in front of a driveway for hours over a rule mix-up. Though on the other hand, it could also just be a made-up story. Now, of course, the rest of this I don't doubt. This is totally plausible. I do think that sometimes DMs don't understand when players get super attached to their player characters. Now, I don't think that applies to DMs who get super attached to NPCs, because I think that that sort of attachment is a shared thing. DMs and players can get attached over player characters or NPCs. It happens. Characters can become a big part of the story, and a big part of your enjoyment of said story. It's not a rare thing at all. When players are playing in that sort of high roleplay, very character-focused game, that kind of thing needs to be respected. Now, of course, I don't think that you should completely abandon the notion of consequences, because then the characters become just cardboard cutouts going through a story with no risk, which I think is not nearly as fun as a story where stuff happens. But at the same time, try to respect the player characters and the players that play them, because those two things are to say the least, major parts of your game, even when you're introducing risk. Alright, if you guys enjoyed this episode of RPG Horror Stories and you want to let me know, then please do leave a like. If you want to see more episodes of RPG Horror Stories, then please do hit subscribe and subscribe to Crispy's Tavern. And finally, if you want to leave your own stories or thoughts, go down to the comments down below. If you can't think of a comment, leave the comment grain of salt to let me know you made it to the end of the video. In essence, like, comment, subscribe. I will see you all next time. Farewell.